All right, join me now is Dr. Doug Frank. We haven't visited with him in a few months, and we got to texting the other night. He said something to me shockingly. He said, President Trump didn't win this last election. The Democrats lost the last election. I'm like, what? Are you serious? I think 77 million turned out for him, didn't they, or something like that? And then I asked him about the midterms. Are you worried about election fraud in the midterms and then the next presidential election? He joins us now. Dr. Frank, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Good to see you, Brandon.
You too, Dr. Doug.
Nice hearing your son's voice, too. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes. Where are you at tonight?
I'm in Shasta County, California.
Oh, wow.
We've got big stuff happening up here. I don't know if you maybe didn't hear, but Clint Curtis is the new registrar of voters there.
I did not hear that. Wow.
That's a big deal. I had something to do with that.
Now, Clint Curtis, is he the one that says he helped to rig the machines for the Democrats or something? Do I have that right?
In 2004 in Ohio, absolutely, that's him. And, he's spoken at several of the events that you and I have been at.
Right.
And he's been going around the country telling everybody about election fraud. And so Shasta wanted to hire Tina Peters to be their new ROV, but of course she's indisposed at present.
She is.
That'll end soon.
Now, and again, I don't want to attribute it to him correctly. Was he asked to use the computers to rig the election, or was he asked to rig it so that they could show the fraud? In other words, didn't he think he was doing it to show how the fraud could be done, not because he was for the fraud, right?
No, in 2004, he wrote the software that the Republican senator used to cheat the election in Ohio.
But did he know that, or was he trying to show them that it could be done, not knowing they would go and do it?
That's a fair question. And I think you're right. I think he showed that it could be done, and then later he testified before the Ohio House. You can see those videos.
I think
online.
This is it.
I think you're right. I think he's not owning up to actually doing the work.
Right. If I remember correctly, he's just like, I tried to show them it can be done, and then I think they took it and they actually did it. I'm like, wait a minute, that wasn't why I did that for you. It was to show you you need to protect the system, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what I remember him telling me when I interviewed him.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Yes.
Here's the video I think you're referring to, by the way.
Yes.
Mr. Curtis, would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Clinton Eugene Curtis.
And where do you reside?
Tallahassee, Florida.
And what is your profession?
I'm a computer programmer.
Would you please speak into the microphone so the audience can hear your testimony?
I'm a computer programmer.
Mr. Curtis, are there programs that can be used to secretly fix elections?
Yes.
How do you know that to be the case?
Because in October of 2000, I wrote a prototype for Congressman Tom Feeney at the company I work for in Oviedo, Florida, that did just that.
And when you say did just that, it would rig an election?
It would flip the vote 51-49 to whoever you wanted it to go to and whichever race you wanted to win.
And would that program that you designed be something that elections officials that might be on county boards of elections could detect?
They'd never see it.
Would you answer that question once again?
They would never see it.
So how would such a program, a secret program that fixes the election, how could it be detected?
You would have to view it either in the source code, or you'd have to have a receipt and then count the hard paper against the actual vote total. Other than that, you won't see it.
All right, Mr. Curtis, if you had been asked, you or others with your professional expertise had been asked to design a protective program that would protect the Ohio elections from against such software to fix the election, could you have done so?
If we've been asked to make a program that could fix the election, sure, anybody can do it.
No, could you have designed a program or a procedure or a protocol that would have protected Ohio against this kind of rigging?
No, you have to look at the source code. You have to get probably programmers from both or all parties to look at the source code and determine if there's anything in there that shouldn't be there. I mean, it's a simple program. You're adding 1 to a person's total. It's 100 lines of code tops.
All right. Are you aware of whether there was any protective action in Ohio against this kind of vote rigging through software?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
You were not asked to assist in the development of any protective system. Is that correct?
No, I was not.
Have you reviewed at all the election results in Ohio?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Given the availability of such vote rigging software and the testimony that has been given under oath of substantial statistical anomalies and gross differences between exit polling data and the actual tabulated results, do you have an opinion whether or not the Ohio election, presidential election, was hacked?
Yes, I would say it was. I mean, if you have exit polling data that is significantly off from the vote, then it's probably hacked.
And your testimony is under oath?
Yes, sir.
And the testimony you've given is true?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Interesting. So that's Clint, right?
Yep.
And you're saying he is now what?
He is the person in charge of elections now in Shasta County, Northern California.
How did that?
They call them ROVs out here. You know, most people call them like the election clerk, but they call them the registrar of voters.
Was he elected or appointed?
Appointed by the Board of Supervisors because they fired the previous one.
So that's obviously a pretty conservative area.
Yes, Shasta County is very red.
And you've had a lot to do with this.
Well, I don't want to take any credit. It's all the
Why not?
grassroots have done.
If the credit's due, then take it. So you had a lot to do with this.
Well, I've been involved from the very beginning, yes.
Okay.
For several years now.
Yeah. Well,
It's an exciting county because in January of 2023, they voted out all their Dominion machines. It was a big deal.
wow. Have you gotten your phone back from the FBI?
No.
Are you going to Mike Lindell's trial June 2nd?
I wasn't invited and I'm not testifying, so I don't know what. I know that it's a big deal and everybody's all upset about it on, in all the circles you and I've run in, we're all concerned about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wish him the best. I've testified at a couple of his trials, and I testified in that arbitration about the $5 million prize after the cyber symposium. And
well, I set for a deposition for this trial. I've set for 3 depositions, I think, but I've
set for a few myself.
I've set for a deposition for this trial that's coming up June 2nd. So I don't know if they're going to use my testimony or not.
I also sat one for this one as well.
I bet you did. All right. So that's why you're on California. Now, let's go to the President Trump's 2024 victory.
Yes.
Now, you said something to me that shocked me. You said that President Trump didn't win as much as the Democrats lost.
Right.
What do you mean by that? And can you prove that?
Yes. So I've got some graphs I can show you, but I'm going to hold off on that. Let me just give you the overall summary. I think that'll help you. Remember about a year ago when President Trump was launching his big campaign to run, the big part of his campaign, he came out and said, we're going to make the election too big to rig. And when that happened, a bunch of folks started calling me on my phone. Hey, Dr. Frank, this doesn't sound right. Why is he saying this? So you know me, I'm a numbers guy. I went to my hotel room and I sat down and I did the calculations. And I figured out that if you try to get more Republicans registered and then chase those ballots and harvest them during the election, the best you're going to be able to do, if you do a remarkable job, is you're going to be able to increase Trump's turnout versus 2020 to 2024. The best you'd be able to do is increase his turnout by 3%. And we're up against a huge cheat. The 2020 cheat was over 10 million ballots, easy. And so if you're going to get a measly 3% increase, you're not going to be able to compete against a 10 million ballot cheat. So I called Mike, and I said, Mike, you need to tell the president to stop saying this. We don't need to be out harvesting ballots. We need to be trying to fix election fraud. That's the real problem. Because, the best they're going to do is increase by 3%. And so I don't know if you remember, but then Trump shut up, didn't say that for like 4 months. But then as the Republican Party moved in, as the election approached, he picked up that message again and started talking about too big to rig. And people were all over the country trying to register people to vote and chasing those ballots. Well, In the end, and I can show you the graphs, guess how much Trump's turnout went up from 2020 to 2024?
How much?
3%. Exactly what I predicted. Okay. And there's a very easy way to understand that. I can show you the graphs, but the easy way to understand it is you're going after diminishing returns. Most Republicans are already registered. Most people that are going to vote Republican are already registered, and most people that are registered are going to vote who are Republicans. So you're going after a smaller and smaller fraction, and you're working harder and harder for it. It's not a productive strategy. I can show you I have lots of graphs I could show you, but I can show you how many people were actually registered. For example, in Pennsylvania, where TPUSA, Turning Point, had this big thing, and Scott Pressler was out there. Oh, yeah, we're going to save Pennsylvania. We're going to register all these people to vote. They registered fewer people to vote in 2024 than they did in 2020, substantially less. Why? Because you're after a smaller and smaller fraction of the population. The numbers just don't pan out. It's not a good strategy. But what do you hear the Republican Party saying nationally? Oh, we saved the country. We're going to do the same thing again next time. Bad plan. Because you worked extra hard and you got 3%. Next time you might only get 2% more. You're up against cheating, and a massive amount of cheating. And
so you're saying there was still massive cheating in this last election. Was it too big to rig?
Was not too big to rig.
So why did they not rig it?
Tons of cheating still in the election. We're different now than we were 4 years ago. We have teams all over the country right now exposing fraud all over the place. The difference is that in 2020, we had Biden and then plus a huge amount of cheating. In this election, you still had a huge amount of cheating, but the turnout dropped. The floor fell out from underneath the Democrats. Kamala is a dud. And I've got graphs I can show you state by state that the turnout went down in nearly every state in America dramatically for the Democrat Party. So really the reason why Trump won isn't because they were out there harvesting. They barely increased his turnout at all. What happened is the bottom fell out from underneath the Democrats. It's a huge loss. I mean, in California alone, Kamala lost 3.5 million ballots compared to Biden in 2020. And, she dropped all over the country. It's shocking.
So you're saying if they put up a halfway decent candidate in 3 years, then then you add the cheating, they win the White House.
Then it's over. And and I can show you, and I've got long explanations of this on my YouTube channel. Where I show all the graphs and show you the drop in every state and do a comparison. And I can show you the trend is really, really bad across the nation. I mean, the only reason Trump won is because he was able to hold his own. I mean, MAGA is awake across the country, and then he was able to hold that and maybe increase just a little bit. But the real reason why he survived was because the Democrats put up a dud.
Does he know that? Does he, in his heart of hearts, does he know this?
I haven't told him face to face, but I've been telling everybody around the country.
Do the people around him? Do the people around him in the RNC know this, and are they preparing accordingly for the next race?
No, they're not. The Republican Party is not our friend, and I think you knew that. It's the Uniparty, right? They across the country, they're more interested in influence and power than they are in winning elections, as is clearly shown even in the 2024 election. Look at all the down ballot losses all across the country. When Trump won in 2016, he had a much larger majority in the Congress, you'll recall. This time around, he barely eked out a small majority, and history teaches us that whoever wins the presidential, the other party wins the midterms. And I've shown graphs showing the trends heading into the midterms. We're in serious trouble. I think we're going to lose the midterms. And if the Congress goes Democratic in the midterms, you know what the first thing they're going to do?
Impeach Trump. Impeach him.
Trump. So we've got a very small window here to fix it. And the GOP is out there trumpeting, yeah, we saved the country. We need to do the same thing again. Let's go out and harvest ballots. Fat chance, buddy. You're after.
Explain to those who maybe don't know what harvesting ballots means.
So what the whole strategy was, to make it too big to rig. They were going to go out and register people that are not registered to vote already, and then encourage them to order absentee ballots, and then go knock on their door and collect them. A lot of states that's called harvesting. In a lot of states that's legal, and California is an example of that.
It's legal or illegal?
Legal. It is okay
in a lot of the states.
A lot of states, it is legal to do that. Some states, it's illegal. And in the states where it's illegal to go collect the ballots, then in those states, what you do is you go knock on the door and say, hey, order your absentee ballot, and I'm going to come nag you to turn it in afterwards. And now in Pennsylvania, most people don't know this because TPUSA is out there bragging how they rescued Pennsylvania, which they didn't. Pennsylvania just went up a tiny bit. If Trump's turnout went up a tiny bit, what happened is the Democrats didn't turn out. The Democrats fell a lot compared to the tiny increase, and still Pennsylvania was barely eked out, just barely eked out. So what really happened in Pennsylvania is Elon Musk lived out there for a month, hired buses to actually bus the Amish people to the polls. You want to know what saved Pennsylvania? That's one thing that saved Pennsylvania. Another thing that saved Pennsylvania is some of the counties, for example, Montgomery County, they did a remarkable job policing every part of the election. They had volunteers basically scrutinizing every single detail. You might remember that in the 2020 election, Montgomery County is where there were 4 Supreme Court cases from. So those people there are awake and engaged. And that's really the solution to fixing our elections, is to get the local citizens engaged. Right now, everybody's kind of apathetic.
Okay, so in the midterms, do they lose the House and the Senate, or one?
Yep.
You think they lose both?
Yes, I think we're in serious trouble.
Do you think? Okay, just so remind everybody, a president can be impeached in the House. They vote. They get, I think it's a 2/3 majority vote, right, to impeach.
I'm not sure. I don't remember that.
Look that up for me, Logan, will you? What percentage do you need in the House to impeach? And then if they get the votes for impeachment, then they go to the Senate for a trial.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to Bill Clinton, if you remember, right?
Yeah.
And he won the trial.
The Monica Lewinsky thing, yeah.
Right. He won the trial in the Senate. So he got impeached, but he wins the trial in the Senate. Do you think they impeach him and then go to trial in the Senate?
I think the opposition to Trump is livid right now and very organized and very active. And they're going to, what did they do for for most of Trump's first term? They threw anything and everything at him to try to stop him from being successful. And are you kidding? Right now, that guy is in there, he's got his wrecking ball out. It's almost fun watching the news again these days to see the new executive orders that are coming out every week. Mm-hmm. But keep in mind, all those executive orders are temporary, right? They can all be overturned just as fast as Trump is overturning Biden's orders. So, what really has to happen is we need Congress right now to ratchet in the forward movement that President Trump has been giving us. But exactly the opposite is happening. You notice who opposed the budget. His big budget bill, the Republicans in the Congress did. And remember when he was doing the tariff negotiations to pressure other countries, who brought out a bill to try to stop him? The Republicans. Mm-hmm. So I don't think the Republicans are our friends.
And by the way, you only need a simple majority to impeach in the House.
I thought that was the case, but I didn't want to say it. I wasn't sure.
Simple majority. And I'm guessing that's probably the case in the Senate then too, a simple majority.
Yeah. So I think we're in serious trouble.
So do you think he could be impeached and then convicted in the Senate?
And they're going to say, oh, he's a felon and he was already convicted in this case. And it's like they're going to go after him. They got to. They're losing the country otherwise. Now, there's something new this time around. You might remember I think it was 2018. It could have been 2017, but I think it was 2018. Trump's one of his executive orders gave him the authority to overturn an election, to nullify an election.
Well, by the way, it's a 2/3 vote in the Senate to convict.
Good. Okay.
Keep going.
You might remember his executive order gave himself the authority to overturn an election if you could prove foreign interference. He did that. It was one of his executive orders. It's like his 75th executive order, his first term. Well, when Biden took office in 2021, He renewed that executive order, and that order is still in effect. So we could have some pretty interesting times ahead if in the midterms there's funny business. Trump might even just nullify the election. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing to see?
Now, what would that involve?
All he has to do is prove that there's funny business in the election, foreign interference, and he has the executive authority to nullify it.
Because he signed that executive order already, right?
Yeah, it's already in place. And that would enable him to, I mean, we'd call it the National Guard and hold a new election. And you already see him going that way, you know, election day being a single day and a national holiday, and we're going to get paper ballots, and, you know, maybe we're going to have purple ink on our thumbs this time around. Who knows?
Are you saying that would go on?
I think we're headed for some interesting times.
You think that would happen in the midterms?
Oh, yeah. Because he's not going to be willing to give up the House with funny business, because then it just basically makes him into a lame duck for the last 2 years, because that's, you know, that'll dominate everything and he won't be able to carry out his agenda.
How concerned are you with a civil war in America?
I think I've been telling people we either need to use our First Amendment rights now and fight the First Amendment war now, or we're going to be fighting the Second Amendment war. That's what I've been saying. And so, you know, I am concerned. I'm very concerned.
Do you have any polls that show, I mean, when you have Democrats talking about, you know, eliminating the president, when you have Democrats talking about going after their people and putting them up against a wall, and all the rhetoric we've heard during his first term, and then when he's running, and then the two attempts on his life, and that seemed very funny, like there was inside help on that one, right? Those two.
I would agree that looked very suspicious.
And then the Comey doing what he did last week, others saying the things they're saying. It seems as though the leadership of the Marxist or of the Democrats, it seems as though some in their own leadership, Schumer saying what he did out, you know,
yes,
about the Supreme Court and different things. It seems as though these people really want that. I mean, why else would you be saying those things?
It's a Bezmenov revolution, remember. It's fifth generation warfare. Remember, Yuri Bezmenov defected from Russia.
Right.
And he said that that ideological subversion and creating chaos and creating crises is part of the process for the fifth generation warfare.
Demoralize, destabilize, chaos, and then the new norm.
100%. And that's I think chaos is what they want. You know, I'm traveling the country. You know me now. I've been doing this solid almost every day since we first met back in March of 2021. And I'm telling you, the country is not the country it used to be. You know, I go to these cities like Portland or San Francisco. It's overrun with homeless people. There's crap on the streets. The economies are, I mean, this is deliberate. This is not an accident.
So tell me more. Tell me more. This is a fascinating conversation. What else do I need to know? What else does our listening audience need to know?
I think the solution to this problem was right out of Yuri Bezmenov's own mouth. He said, the way you fix ideological subversion, he says, is you return to religion.
You teach patriotism.
Yes, absolutely.
He said that. And he said, teach patriotism.
Yes. And so what's encouraging to me is I see a political revival nationwide. You know, I've given almost 1,000 presentations now across the country, Brandon. I've got a PowerPoint for every one of them, so I can show what I'm doing, and 800 counties. And as I travel the country, I see a political revival happening and a spiritual revival happening. But I don't see the left backing down. I don't see the other side backing down. So what that means is it's going to come to a head. And there's like human nature here that's been a little frustrating for me. Before the election, I had people all over the country all engaged in election reform. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Well, now that Trump's winning, you know, I walk into a state like Missouri and they say, what are you here for, Dr. Frank? Trump won, you know, go away. He's going to fix the country. I'm like, no, you don't understand. You're the government. You got to start acting like the government. If you don't act like the government, Trump's not our savior. We, the people, are the government. America is an experiment in self-government. You have to engage. And if you expect anything that he does to be permanent without you ratcheting it in, I make the analogy. It's sort of like we're in World War II he's bombing Berlin, which is great, gives us air cover, but we have to occupy Normandy. It takes ground troops. The people have to wake up and engage in order to hold on to any progress we've got coming right now. We're in trouble.
Let's go back to midterms.
Yeah.
What is your polling, if you're doing any, or if you're reading Rasmussen, Mark Mitchell, any of these guys, what is your polling saying as far as the turnout? I know it's early, but the turnout for Republicans. In other words, will there be enough people turn out and enough demoralized Democrats that will be fine? Or are you sensing that the Republicans are becoming complacent and won't really take the midterms that seriously, and the Democrats are ticked off and are going to turn out in huge numbers?
That would be very close to how I would describe it. I projected the trends in every state, and the trends are not towards the Republicans. We barely eked this out. I think God gave us a miracle by keeping Biden alive, so that the Democrats were totally, all they had left was a dud of a candidate. All they needed was a good candidate, and they would have carried the day.
And who do you see that in 2028? Is that AOC? I mean, wow. I know that makes you laugh, but that's what people are saying. They kind of see her as the defunct leader of the Democrat Party right now.
Well, the party, I agree. The party has gone so hard to the left. She might be the de facto leader, but really, I think it's not her. I think it's been Obama the whole time. I don't think he's passive. I think he's behind the scenes.
Right, but who's going to be the candidate they put up forward? Who's going to be the face?
Oh, boy. I don't know if I'm the right guy to ask, but, maybe Newsom. I don't know. Somebody from one of the big states, one of the big people. It's probably going to be Newsom, I'm guessing.
I mean, why else would he be doing that silly podcast and interviewing Republicans and Steve Bannon and people? He's trying to run to the middle, right?
Yes, right. And if he's not a very good guy, but there you go. I'm not a fan.
Tell me in closing, what do you see as a professor, a historian, a Christian, a patriot, someone that tracks trends? What do you see coming for the country?
In the back of my Bible, I have a graph. It covers 400 years of Israel's history. And it shows them falling into idolatry and then repenting and idolatry and repenting over and over again, 12 generations. And it ends in the Babylonian captivity, where Nebuchadnezzar came in and took away for 70 years before they were restored. What I don't know, we're definitely on a downward slope. What I don't know is if we're going to repent fast enough that God will restore us, or whether we're headed for Babylon. And it depends on us, I really think. And the Bible says in 2 Chronicles, God says, if my people will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land. Well, that's an if-then proposition. The if has 4 contingencies. If my people will humble themselves, and humbling is recognizing your role and what gifts God is giving you, you're supposed to deploy, humble themselves and pray, seek his face. You got to talk to God. Hey, God, what is it you want me to do? And then what does it say? And turn from their wicked ways. Well, I don't see us doing that very rapidly, my friend. In fact, I just got on the board of directors for A Piece of Heaven out here in California. It's a new facility we're putting together now to basically nurture sex-trafficked children back to health. It's going to be a 250-bed facility. It's a big deal. We're going to be working with these groups that are rescuing kids. Child trafficking is a huge problem in our country. It's becoming larger than the drug problem in terms of business. So
who by the way is sex trafficking these children? How old, and who is sex trafficked? What are their occupations? How old are they?
Are the people the children or the perpetrators?
How old are the children, and then how old are the perpetrators? What's their occupation?
So I'll just answer that question. Let me show you a short experience I had, and it'll answer that question. There's really 2 kinds of sex trafficking. There's the kind where you import people, say from south of the border, and a lot of those girls are typically 10 to 15 years old. That's what that tends to be. And the cartels are the ones importing them, and the families come in and they're indentured servants. So that's one kind of trafficking, and that's quite prevalent. There's another kind of trafficking that most people aren't even aware of that to me is the really troubling one. And I don't want to give identities away, but I was speaking to a parole officer in a Midwestern state recently, and he has 20 active cases at any given time that he's monitoring in his parole duties. And he says out of his 20 former prisoners that he's monitoring, 18 out of the 20 are child abductors. I said, what? What do you mean? Why are they out of prison? They abducted children. And he goes, yeah. He says, but they're out on parole now. And I said, well, what's the recidivism rate? And he says 80%. So out of the 20 cases that he was monitoring, 18 of them were former child abductors, and then 14 of them would be repeating. They were the recidivism rate. They would be repeating that offense. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. That's horrible. We can't, at the minimum, that means 14 kids are going to be abducted in our own country. And he says, yeah, and this is how they do it. A guy in a Midwestern city somewhere will just park his van next to the playground, and mom's out there watching their 2, 3, 4-year-old child, play on the swing, and she's reading a magazine, and the next minute she looks up and her kid isn't there anymore. And that child's been abducted, and that child will never be found again. And he says what's really horrible about it, he says, is 20, 30 years ago, those perverts that would abduct those children, they would take them home and do whatever they were going to do, and then they'd bury them in a forest afterwards. He says, but nowadays, because he has to read the files of all these parolees, so he knows what's going on. He says, nowadays, these guys, they don't dispose of the children after they're done with them. They sell them into the black market. They're worth $5,000 a piece. So when you ask, who are these guys and how are they employed? You know how they're employed? They abduct children for a living. They have their way. When they're tired, they sell the kid for $5,000. If you just did one a month, you'd have a pretty good income. And that is a huge and growing problem in our country because the demand for those children is so high. This is our country, Brandon. This is our country, and has a demand like that.
The demand for these children is not because we've imported a bunch of illegals here that are, debased and just it's the demand is from Americans.
Yes.
The demand is from American-born citizens desiring these children.
It's similar to like the drug trade, right? The demand, they wouldn't be importing drugs into America if the demand for those drugs wasn't there. And I didn't talk about the families that they're bringing in that come in as indentured servants. You can hear horror stories after horror stories about those poor girls that are broken in at the border, and the panties in the trees and all that stuff. It's a devastating thing to hear.
And what you're saying is they bring in families, and so you may have a mom with children.
Yes,
she's knowingly sex trafficking her child to pay off her debt or her family's debt.
Yeah, what happens is it'll typically be a family of 4. There'll be a father, a mother, a daughter, and a son, and the cartel will import them into America. But they don't just drop them off in a city and walk away. They've already got jobs. They've got a job for the father. They've got a job for the mother. She's typically in a hotel cleaning rooms or something. And the father and the son, they're on construction or agriculture or something like that. And the young daughter goes into a brothel. And until their $30,000 debt as a group is paid, they all have to stay in whatever job they've been assigned. If any one of the 4 says, well, I'm done with this, I'm leaving, then the cartel brings in an enforcer and slaughters the whole family. And, that's why when you hear Trump talking about these gang members that he's deporting, a lot of those are the enforcers that are coming up to enforce the will of the cartels, enforce the contracts.
So why is President Trump not telling the story you just told? We should be hearing that story and hearing those stories so the American people understand how it works.
Tell me about it. Well, that's why I'm on the board of this new thing, and I'm out here spreading the word. I got into this. You know me well. You were there right when I got involved publicly. I was into this for elections, but what strange thing has happened is as I've been traveling the country, guess what I've discovered? That elections are tied to sex trafficking. I can't give away identities, but I was riding in a car with a federal official, and we're driving and we were talking about this problem. And he says, by the way, right over there, it was a federal marshal. He says, right over there, that building over there, there's a brothel in it. And I'm thinking, what? How come I don't know that there's a brothel in my own neighborhood? Okay. I mean, it's like, I don't market that stuff, but I mean, I don't purchase that stuff, but there's a brothel that I don't even know. It's like the back end of a strip mall or something. I didn't even know it was there. And so we're talking about that, and I'm kind of marveling at the fact of how naive and uninformed I am. And a few minutes later, he points to the other road, the side of the street. He goes, and that's a brothel over there. I said, wait a minute. You know where all the brothels are. And he's going, yeah, that's my job. He says, I go around and arrest these enforcers and we deport them. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. But if you work for the government and you know where the brothels are, that means law enforcement knows where all the brothels are. Why are they open? He says, it's not that simple. He says, because if you were to close down the brothel, then you've got to actually rescue 80 people, not just the 20 girls in the brothel. You got 80 people because the enforcers are going to come up and slaughter these families. He says, that's the first nuance. The second problem, he says, is law enforcement are customers. And another problem, he says, it goes right up into the legislature. We have judges that have been customers. We got legislators. It's a mess. And this should remind you of the Epstein files. And it should remind you, why don't we have that publicly exposed file? And the answer is because there are a lot of people on that list that are in power, and they don't want that list out. And so when you ask the question, why don't more people know about this? Because they're going to be heads going to be rolling, and it's going to be pretty ugly.
Have you been able to confirm any of this information here? Report to the governor, racketeering, bribery, corruption, election fraud, how the discovery of mass corruption in the state of Arizona led to the abduction of McKinley Harris Thaler by John Harris Thaler, author of Decline and Fall of California. Are you familiar with this report? I've interviewed him a few times. He gave me the report.
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read it. I'm sorry. I've been busy, but if you want to send me a link or something, I'll have a look at it. I don't know anybody who's been more places or done more grassroots work than me, and
what I'm getting at is he
a lot
also
of stories to tell, and I can probably confirm or just.
Well, then I'm going to send you the report. I'm going to say it's a pretty thick book. He has all the documents in there, and he's apparently he hasn't been sued. That's one of the things I asked him when I saw him a few months ago, and he handed me the report in person. No, I haven't been sued. I'm like, well, that's interesting, because if it wasn't true, you'd think of people be knocking your door down with subpoenas and cease and desist letters. But he claims there's a lot of racketeering and bribery going on, and money laundering with deeds and houses and cartels.
Yeah, that's correct. There's a lot of that. Absolutely.
With the cartels.
You asked about Civil War a minute ago, and I think this is another relevant story. I was in Texas a couple years ago, and I was with Phil Waldron. You remember Phil? Yeah. And he's
former military out of Texas.
Yes, and he's contracting with the government right now. And one of his jobs is he monitors the immigration from Mexico into America. And he told me, he said 25% of the military-age men that are coming across the border from Mexico into the United States are CCP.
What percentage?
And I used to be in academics, and I'm telling you, people that live in China don't just come to America willy-nilly.
What percentage did you just say?
25% of military-age men coming across the border from Mexico into Texas, because that's where he's monitoring it, were CCP. Mm-hmm. Now, when I heard that was shocking to me, right? A couple of months later, I was in southern Arizona. I was in one of the counties there, and you know me, I meet with election integrity people, and I often meet with sheriffs to discuss things. And I happened to be with the sheriff there for county on the border, and I said, "Hey, I heard that there's all this immigration going on from Mexico into Texas. Do you see that same problem in your county?" And he said to me, this sheriff, he said, as a matter of fact, Dr. Frank, last week I deputized 10 of my citizens and we drove an entire encampment of military age Chinese men out of one of our local forests. And I'm like, what? Where did they go? And he says, I don't know. He says, they're out of my county now. He says he'd reported it to the federal government. This was before the election in 2024, by the way. He'd reported it to immigration and they drove them out of their county. He says it's a whole encampment. So, you talk about, is there going to be civil war? There may be other kinds of war. There may be all kinds of interesting things being prepared, being set up right now in our country. I think we have interesting times ahead. I'm not really, I don't tend to be a conspiracy guy, but right now the evidence is overwhelming. We got stuff going on here. We got to wake up and address.
Yeah, well, there's an article I posted today at Worldview Report, dated May 20th, 2025. That's yesterday. U.S. Army medics prepare for war with China. Service is focused on overcoming logistical hurdles and other obstacles now so that medical professionals will be ready if they're needed. Now, I've been reporting on the fact the Pentagon's been getting ready for a war with China for a long time. In 2020, I did a big 1 hour on this, so 5 years ago. But I can tell you, I have plenty of reports right now that this Pentagon, Pete Hegseth, is preparing for war with China. I don't think they want it, but they're preparing for it. And the reason they're preparing for it is because China is openly saying they're going to go to war with us. China is preparing their people that they're going to go to war with us. So China's already said, we're going to go to war with the U.S. We'll decide when, but we're going to war. The U.S. is preparing for war. They don't want it under this administration, but they know they have to prepare because they already know China's already announced to the world and their people, they are going to go to war with us, right? So when you see all of these CCP males here, like you just described, that is the gray terror you do before you go to war. And you take out their water and their critical infrastructure and their transportation and communications, which is what Gordon Chang has warned on this show for a couple years now. And he says they're going to do bombings and they're going to poison water treatment plants.
100%.
And he's going to be our speaker this fall. Full details, and you can register for October 3rd and 4th at worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. But what you're bringing to us tonight, really, and we got to visit more often here on the air, because what you're bringing to me, Dr. Frank, is compelling because, A, you're a patriot, you're a Christian, you're a professor, you're someone that's used to dealing with hard facts, hard data. Show me the data. I mean, I still have your mug. What's your mug called? Something about the data. Yeah, that's
Follow
it.
The data
Follow
with
the
Dr.
data.
Frank.
So I got one of your mugs, okay? You're all about the data. But you're also providing me with, you're taking the temperature of the American population with your travels, and you're hearing from the elected officials and the intelligence community and the police community, sheriff community in your travels. So everything you're sharing tonight is only affirming what we have been talking about and hearing from other people, be it, Todd Bensman, Michael Yon, Gordon Chang, David Gobbets. You're affirming as a man who's traveling the country almost nonstop, what our guys are telling us, but you're doing it from your personal experiences of gathering information on the ground.
Yeah, and I confess, if I'd listened to someone like you 10 years ago, I would have said, Brandon, he's a nice guy, he's an honest guy, but I think he's a little out there, a little too conspiratorial for me. I probably would have discounted. But now that I am, I'm awake now, brother.
So let me ask you this. The fact that I've been doing this 35 years, and in my second book, third book in 1995, predicted social credit scores like China, that would come here. I predicted a vaccine tracking system that could be used against political dissidents. I talked about violence in our country that would look like a movie. What does that say to you if me, I'm just really an average guy who just, is interested in rights and reads and research. I'm not doing anything I don't think anyone else could do if they just committed their life occupation to it. what, based on the fact that 10 years ago you wouldn't have listened to what I've been doing or thought I was crazy, but I've been doing this 35 years with this kind of track record. What does that say to you about the country that we have even people like you that are very knowledgeable that up until recently wouldn't even listen to guys like me? It makes me wonder if we're too late. It's too late.
Yes. That's why I talked about the graph. I don't know if we're getting to this in time or not. I'm impressed by the ability of the media to suppress these kinds of dialogues. It's like you have the conspiracy about Kennedy getting shot by Oswald. Right now, all that stuff's going to come out, and a lot of these conspiracies that were conspiracy wackadoodles are coming true and being found to be true. And even though the facts are coming out, people are still asleep. And I sit down with people all the time, county leaders who are level-headed, who are totally convinced that there's no problem in our elections. And I spend most of my time just showing them, here, I can hack into your election. Here, let's do it right here together, or here's the facts. And we find fraud in their own counties. And it's a slow.
Do they believe it?
Process.
Do they believe you, or they discount you as a wackadoodle?
I have to have the hard evidence. And, when you and I were working together back in 2021, I was working mostly with statistics. I had some hard evidence, but mostly statistics at that point. Nowadays, we find the actual fraud. We find the people who are dead, but they've been dead for 20 years, but they're voting in every election. That's what we look for. And we find the actual fraud, and we show how it's happening in their system. What then happens is they know it's real, but then they have another problem, and that's that if they take on the establishment, then they lose their jobs. We have a big deal about to happen in Missouri. Denny Hoskins was elected the new Secretary of State there, and he campaigned on single-day elections, paper ballots, hand counting. That's a big deal, and he got elected. I was shocked. And now, and this goes to our discussion, which is why I brought it up. The people are all saying, okay, Denny, we elected you. Now get in there and do it. But you got to realize he doesn't have the power. He has the authority to make the claim, but the legislature in Missouri can just write the law and legislate him out of business. And guess what? You think these legislatures, come on, this is Missouri. You think these places are red? You're wrong. The legislatures are way corrupted. They're way compromised. We don't even have one good legislature in this country. So I think what's happened is we've been degrading for so long. I think for at least for a couple generations now. You've been doing this 35 years. You were awake 35 years ago. I wasn't. Okay. But we've been degrading that entire period of time. Now we're in a position where people they're complacent. They're conditioned. Don't bother me. I've spoken to clerks before who know there's fraud in their election, and they look at me and they say, I'm not going to give up my retirement. I only have 2 more years. Just leave me alone. I'm going to just keep doing the same thing, and then I'm going to retire and take my money.
We hear that the CIA has penetrated every state legislature there is. Everyone, the CIA. Would you agree?
I don't have direct evidence of that, but I'm telling you, my personal experience in every legislature tells me there's serious control mechanisms going on. When I met with the Secretary of State of Louisiana, Kyle Ardoin, a couple of years ago, you might remember that.
I interviewed him.
Yes, and he was going to decertify the machines in that state. And remember, he went under the radar for months rather than decertify. And when he finally came out, after the election in 2022, a group of our citizens that were chasing him down in front of a microphone, essentially, said, hey, Dr. Frank met with you on a Sunday afternoon, and they hacked into you. It wasn't me directly, but indirectly that very day, we hacked into his elections all over his state, and you were going to decertify the elections. How come you didn't do it? And he denied the entire thing. And so we gathered up a bunch of affidavits. We cornered him in his office, and the next day he resigned. So, in other words, these people would rather resign than admit to what's going on because they know they're in trouble. There's some huge pressure going on somewhere.
Do you believe the CIA is involved in manipulating elections?
I know for a fact that the elections are being monitored by federal networks in real time. So I don't know for a fact that they're being manipulated in real time. But if you have the ability to monitor in real time, then you also have the ability to manipulate in real time.
Who is the agency, or do you know who's monitoring it in real time?
CISA, which is one of the things Trump got rid of. Yeah, it's funny. I mentioned Kyle Ardoin. When the day I met with him, he says, "Oh no, Dr. Frank, our elections are secure." And I say, "Well, how do you know?" He says, "Check out my new app. I can monitor them in real time on my cell phone." He doesn't even get it that the fact that he can monitor it in real time means somebody else can monitor it in real time too. I mean, it's a crazy.
But if you had to guess, would you say the NSA or the CIA is involved in manipulating the elections in the U.S., as we have done in other countries?
If I had to bet money, I would bet that they are manipulating elections. If I had to bet money, but I don't have direct evidence that they are doing it, if that makes sense.
But it has to be a very powerful group. And if they weren't doing it, they could stop it if they wanted to.
I have direct evidence, for example, in Pennsylvania, that it was the NGOs that are manipulating the election. We have the logs proving that the non-government organizations were logging into the state registration system.
And adding voters, right?
And adding voters back in. I have direct evidence of that. So in that case, it wasn't the CIA doing it, it was NGOs. But you might be able to argue that the NGOs were enabled by software provided to them by somebody in the CIA. You could argue that.
Well, we had that going on. We had that going on with Senator Jesse Helms back in like 83, 84, Washington Times, accusing the CIA of providing software down in Central America to help the communists win down there.
100%. No, that's true. I've actually spoken to some of those.
So you know that story to be true?
Yeah. Well, did I eyewitness it? Of course not.
Right, but you know you know about what I'm reporting about.
I do, and I've sat in rooms, in skiff rooms, talking to some of the engineers, the software engineers. So I have I have no reason to doubt the truth of that claim.
So it lines up with what you're saying. If they were doing that back in the early 80s and
yes,
Senator Jesse Helms was screaming about it, then why would the CIA not be doing the same thing with NGOs in 2024, 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and what will be 26 and 27 and 28?
Right. And by now they've had decades of practice. When I first met you back in 2020, I just downloaded all the data from Ohio, and I started downloading all the historical data from Ohio because I was very interested in looking at the historical trends so I could find the anomalies to know where to look to find the fraud. And I was unable, because in Ohio, I was unable to download the election data from the 2004 election because of all the election history data we have archived in Ohio, which we have it all. 1 year, everything was expunged. Guess which year that was? 2004. And so, it exposes too much. When we got Tina Peters' backups, why was the state so shook up? State of Colorado so shook up when we got that, because those backups of her systems show that they have modems and they're communicating during the elections. What most people don't realize, though, Brandon, is that that's not the only place I was working. In fact, Lake County, Ohio, just a couple months later, during the spring election in 2021, we had somebody hack into their election during the election, map out all the networks. All the machines were online in real time and totally manipulatable during the election. We gathered all that evidence. We did this, by the way, at the request of the Lake County officials. So there's nothing illegal about it. And those Lake County officials they wanted to get rid of their Dominion machines. So they asked us to come in and do that. We did that. And then we gave all that information to Frank LaRose, the Secretary of State of Ohio. And he called in the FBI, just like Colorado called in the FBI. Full investigation, no charges, nothing illegal was done. A county official requested a security check on their system. What's wrong with that? We documented everything. We turned it all in. FBI totally cleared everything. There's no wrongdoing. But it proves that these machines are online and accessible during the elections, actually during the elections. And I have more stories that I'm not at liberty to talk about. I talked about those two, Mesa County and Lake County, Ohio, because those two have become public. I'm allowed to to talk about those. But people don't hear about that because, it's so successfully suppressed in the media.
Tim, close with this here. Tim Burchett's come out in the last 24 hours and said this, talk about Kennedy and the CIA and all these groups. Listen to this.
Hey everybody, Tim Burchett returning from a oversight committee. We were talking about the John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy's assassination in 1963. Just some incredible testimony from the attending physician in the emergency room, and he told us the way the bullets entered, where they came from, and they came from two dadgum different directions, and there were 4 bullets fired. It was just incredible. Anyway, big cover up, of course. Will we get to the bottom of it? Probably not. You always got a patsy, and it's obviously Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy. He might have pulled the trigger on one of the bullets, but they don't think on all 3, and that would have been a bolt action, which is a Mannlicher carbine. It's an Italian carbine. I got one somewhere. It was written up in a magazine one time as the only gun that never won a war. Oswald could have walked into a Western Auto and bought an M1 with a scope for under $50 at that time. It was just literally a Western Auto, but he chose a mail order Italian carbine. The whole thing's just crazy. Anyway, we're digging into it. Thank y'all for sending me here.
Wow. Closing comment?
Wow. I was in Mercer County, Pennsylvania, which is the neighboring county to Butler County, the day that Trump was shot. And I drove over the next day and had a look at that place. And I was only 10 minutes away. And I asked myself the question, if I was going to try to assassinate the president, where would I position myself? Exactly where this guy was. And any professional security person would have protected that place. It's shocking to me. The prima facie evidence is that was not an accident.
Absolutely not. So, he had help from the inside.
It's just, I mean, here I am. I'm being a scientist. I'm being skeptical. I'm saying, give me evidence, right? But what am I going to do? Be here in 60 years when they open up the files after and show that the same kind of testimony that we just heard from that congressman. We're going to hear the same kind of crap again. This is our problem in our country. We, the people, have become disengaged. We are letting other people teach our children. We're letting other people run our elections. We're letting other people run our government. If we don't wake up, yes, we're headed for that civil war. We're headed for that Second Amendment war. You've been sounding the alarm for decades. I've only been sounding the alarm for 5 years. But more and more of us are sounding the alarm. And so what's happening, I think, is the temperature's going up. And it's either going to get fixed politically soon, or it's going to be fixed in other ways. So there you go.
What's your website, Doc?
I don't have a website because they keep taking them down. But I got social media.
Who keeps taking them down?
I had websites on Google. I had websites on Facebook where people could come and look at all that, and all that stuff was taken down. So, but you can come to my social media. Just look for Follow the Data with Dr. Frank. I've got an X. You can find me on X. I only recently restarted X once. It started being good again, and so I only have a few thousand people there. But overall, maybe 150,000 social media followers. I wish I had more time to do that sort of stuff, but it's a losing proposition because they just take it down and they shadow ban me and stuff. So I've decided I'm going to fight the war instead, and I'll write the book afterwards.
Good. Well, please come back because we want to get more of these field reports from you.
Oh, I'd be delighted, Brandon. It's great chatting with you.
You too. Dr. Doug Frank checking in tonight. Follow the Data with Dr. Doug Frank. Glad he's with us tonight. All right, before we go to Annie Cyrus, take a look. Don't forget, Our national conference is coming up Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. We've added 2 more speakers. Hadia will be joining us, not for just Thursday night banquet, but the conference itself, and Dr. Andy Woods. Gordon Chang, Sidney Powell, Dr. Lana, Chris Martinson, Mark Mitchell with Rasmussen, Alex Newman. All the hotels and info are there. This is the theater. It's a beautiful theater here in Collierville, Tennessee. Very safe community, very safe community, okay? Make sure you get on board, okay? Get on board and get booked now. We only have seating for 350 people, okay? Get your tickets, get your hotel. If you want to join us for the banquet on Thursday night, that's optional. Hadia will be the keynote speaker. That's our cost. There's no profit in that. Okay, that's $60 is what it cost us for the room and the food. And you get a choice of chicken and steak and amazing salad and baked potato. It's one of Melissa's favorite restaurants. They have really great food. And when you're there with us, you'll see why we like it. Okay, so hopefully you can join us for the banquet as well. All the details are there, worldviewstore.com, the banquet and the concert itself, worldviewstore.com. Thursday night banquet, optional, October 2nd. Conference starts Friday night, October 2nd, Saturday, October 3rd. Okay, full details, worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com.